My name is Victoria, and I am 28 years old. Last Saturday night changed everything I believed about my family. At my sister Emma's engagement party, my parents handed her a check for $55 million while announcing I was no longer welcome in their home. They told me to pack one suitcase and leave immediately. What I discovered in the following weeks about why they chose her over me will shock you. The betrayal runs deeper than money, and the revenge I orchestrated brought justice in ways none of them saw coming. Before we dive into this incredible family drama that completely turned my world upside down, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Please hit that like button if you are ready for a story about family betrayal that will leave you speechless, and do not forget to subscribe because stories like this one deserve to be heard. Trust me, you will want to stick around until the very end to see how karma finally caught up with everyone who wronged me. The Riverside Country Club sparkled with crystal chandeliers and white roses that Saturday evening. Emma had insisted on having her engagement party there, claiming it represented the life she deserved. I arrived wearing the navy blue dress I had saved for months to buy, clutching a carefully wrapped gift for my sister and her fiancé Marcus. Walking through those mahogany doors, I felt proud to be part of what I thought was a celebration of love and family unity. The ballroom buzzed with conversations between my parents' business associates, Emma's sorority sisters, and distant relatives I recognized from Christmas gatherings. Everyone seemed genuinely happy, toasting to Emma's future with Marcus, who worked as a hedge fund manager in Manhattan. My parents, Robert and Catherine, stood near the head table, looking more elegant than I had ever seen them. Mom wore diamonds that caught the light with every gesture, while Dad's custom tuxedo spoke of success and sophistication. They had built their pharmaceutical company from nothing, working 16-hour days throughout my childhood to create the empire that now supported our comfortable lifestyle. Emma floated through the crowd in her designer engagement dress, accepting congratulations and showing off her massive diamond ring. She had always been the golden child, excelling in everything from academics to social connections. While I worked 2 jobs to pay for community college, Emma graduated from Stanford with honors and immediately landed a position at a prestigious marketing firm. The evening progressed beautifully until Dad called for everyone's attention around 10 o'clock. He tapped his champagne flute with his silver spoon, creating that distinctive ringing sound that silenced the room. Mom stood beside him, beaming with pride, as Emma and Marcus joined them at the front. Friends and family, Dad began his voice, carrying the authority that had made him successful in business tonight. We celebrate not just Emma's engagement, but the beginning of a new chapter for our entire family. I smiled from my spot near the back, assuming this would be a typical father of the bride speech about love, commitment, and future happiness. Nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Catherine and I have decided to give Emma and Marcus a wedding gift that will secure their future together. Dad continued, reaching into his jacket pocket. We are transferring $55 million into their joint account, along with full ownership of our vacation properties in Aspen and the Hamptons. The room erupted in gasps and applause. I felt my knees weaken as the magnitude of that number hit me. $55 million. More money than most people see in multiple lifetimes handed over, like a casual graduation gift. But Dad was not finished. He looked directly at me across the crowded room, his expression shifting from paternal pride to something cold and calculating that I had never seen before. This generosity comes with an important family decision, he announced, his voice cutting through the celebrating crowd. We have determined that Emma represents the future of our family name and values. Effective immediately, Victoria is no longer considered part of this family or eligible for any inheritance. The ballroom fell completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as every face turned toward me. Emma's expression showed no surprise, only a satisfied smile that suggested she had known this moment was coming. Victoria, you have until tomorrow morning to collect your personal belongings and leave the family home. Mom added, her voice steady and emotionless. One suitcase should be sufficient for whatever items hold sentimental value. Marcus wrapped his arm around Emma's waist, pulling her closer as if claiming his prize. The crowd began murmuring among themselves, some looking shocked while others nodded approvingly. I realized then that my parents had carefully planned this public humiliation, ensuring maximum witness to my banishment. But why, I managed to ask, my voice barely audible over the blood rushing in my ears. What did I do wrong? Dad's expression remained unchanged. You have consistently failed to meet our family standards. Your career choices, your lifestyle, your inability to form meaningful relationships with successful people. Everything about you reflects poorly on our family reputation. Emma stepped forward, her engagement ring catching the light as she gestured dismissively. Victoria, you have to understand that some people are meant for greatness, while others are meant to be forgotten. Mom and Dad are simply investing in the child who can carry on their legacy properly. The cruelty in her voice hit me like a physical blow. This was my sister, the person I had defended throughout childhood when kids teased her about being adopted. The same girl I had tutored through high school math and comforted during her first heartbreak. Please, I whispered, looking at my parents with desperate hope. We can talk about this privately. There has to be some misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Mom replied firmly. We have made our decision based on careful consideration of what is best for our family's future. Emma has proven herself worthy of our investment and trust. I looked around the room, searching for even one sympathetic face among the guests. Instead, I saw curiosity, pity, and in some cases vindication from people who had always viewed me as the disappointing daughter. The pharmaceutical industry was small and competitive, and my parents' business associates had clearly heard whispers about my failures compared to Emma's successes. Without another word, I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor in the otherwise silent ballroom. Behind me, I heard Dad resume his speech, smoothly transitioning back to celebration as if I had never existed. The valet brought my old Honda Civic to the front entrance, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicles surrounding it. As I drove home to pack that single suitcase, my mind raced with questions that demanded answers. Why now? Why so publicly? And most importantly, what had Emma done to deserve $55 million that I apparently could never achieve? The family house felt like a museum the next morning as I walked through rooms that had shaped my entire childhood. Every photograph on the mantel featured Emma prominently, while I appeared as an afterthought in the background. I had never noticed how deliberately I had been positioned as secondary in our family narrative. Packing one suitcase meant choosing between my grandmother's jewelry and my college textbooks. I selected items with emotional significance rather than monetary value, including the locket Grandma Rose had given me before she passed away. Inside that locket was a photo of us together at my high school graduation, one of the few family milestones where I had felt genuinely celebrated. As I folded clothes into my luggage, I heard Emma's voice echoing from the kitchen downstairs. She was on the phone with someone, her tone animated and victorious in ways that made my stomach turn. Curiosity overrode my desire to leave quietly, so I crept closer to the staircase to listen. Marcus, the plan worked perfectly, Emma was saying, her voice carrying clearly through the empty house. Mom and Dad bought every single lie I told them about Victoria. They actually believe she has been stealing money from their accounts and selling company secrets to competitors. My breath caught in my throat. Stealing money, selling secrets. I had never even had access to my parents' financial information, let alone their business operations. I know it sounds extreme, Emma continued, but Victoria was always going to be a problem for us. With her out of the picture, we get everything: the money, the properties, and complete control over Mom and Dad's pharmaceutical empire when they retire. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear every word of this devastating conversation. The private investigator I hired did amazing work creating those fake financial records. When Mom and Dad saw documentation showing Victoria had allegedly stolen $200,000 over the past 3 years, they were ready to disown her immediately. My legs nearly gave out as the full scope of Emma's manipulation became clear. She had systematically destroyed my reputation with fabricated evidence, convincing our parents that I was a thief and a traitor. Marcus, you should have seen her face when Dad announced the $55 million gift. Emma laughed a sound that chilled me to the bone. She looked like someone had ripped her heart out and stomped on it, which I suppose is exactly what happened. The cruelty in her voice revealed a side of my sister I had never imagined existed. This was not sibling rivalry or competitive behavior. This was calculated destruction designed to eliminate me entirely from the family equation. "What about the adoption records?" Emma asked, and I froze completely. Adoption records. Perfect. When Victoria eventually tries to contest the will or challenge our inheritance, those documents will surface showing she was never legally adopted. Mom and Dad think they are protecting me by keeping that secret, but it gives us permanent leverage. The world tilted sideways as I processed this information. I was adopted. How was that possible when I looked so much like Dad and shared Mom's mannerisms? Unless Emma was the one who was adopted, and she was projecting that reality onto me. "I have to go," Emma said, apparently ending her call. "Victoria should be finishing her packing soon, and I want to watch her leave. There is something satisfying about seeing her drive away in that pathetic car, knowing she will never set foot in this house again." I quickly and quietly returned to my room, my mind racing with this new information. Emma had orchestrated an elaborate scheme involving fake financial records, bribery, manipulation, and lies about adoption to steal my inheritance and destroy my relationship with our parents. But something about her story did not add up. If she was so confident about the adoption records, why had she seemed nervous when discussing them? And why would she need to create fake financial evidence if she already had legal documents proving I was not really part of the family? I finished packing with renewed determination. Instead of feeling defeated, I felt energized by the knowledge that Emma had needed to lie and cheat to win. That meant I still had options, still had ways to fight back and expose the truth. Before leaving my childhood bedroom forever, I used my phone to record a voice memo, summarizing everything I had overheard. If Emma wanted to play games involving evidence and documentation, I would make sure to collect my own proof of her confession. Downstairs, I found Mom and Dad sitting at the kitchen table with paperwork spread between them. They looked up when I appeared with my suitcase, their expressions showing no remorse or second thoughts about their decision. "Victoria," Dad said formally, "I trust you understand that any attempt to contact us or Emma in the future will be considered harassment." "I understand," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. "But I have one question. When did you first suspect I was stealing money from your accounts?" Mom and Dad exchanged a glance before Mom answered. "Emma brought the financial discrepancies to our attention about 6 months ago. She had noticed irregular patterns in our business accounts that seemed to correlate with your visits to our offices. Did you personally verify this evidence, or did you rely entirely on Emma's investigation?" I asked, genuinely curious about how thoroughly they had been manipulated. "Emma hired a reputable private investigator who provided comprehensive documentation," Dad replied defensively. "We did not need to verify what trained professionals had already confirmed." I nodded slowly, filing away this information for future use. "Thank you for clarifying that. I hope someday you will discover the truth about what really happened to your money." With that cryptic statement, I walked out of my childhood home for what I believed would be the last time. Emma stood at the front window, watching me load my suitcase into my Honda Civic with obvious satisfaction. As I drove away, I caught sight of her in my rearview mirror, standing in the doorway like a queen, surveying her conquered territory. She had no idea that I now possessed the key to unraveling every lie she had told. The game was far from over. Emma had won this round through deception and manipulation, but I was about to show her what real strategy looked like when deployed with patience, intelligence, and an unshakable commitment to justice. I drove directly to the downtown law office of Patricia Hawkins, a family attorney whose name I had found online during my sleepless night of research. Her reviews mentioned expertise in inheritance disputes and family fraud cases, exactly the kind of legal representation I needed to challenge Emma's carefully constructed lies. Patricia's office occupied the 15th floor of a glass building that overlooked the city's financial district. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to assess every detail of my appearance and demeanor as I explained my situation. "Let me understand this correctly," Patricia said after listening to my story for 30 minutes. Your parents disinherited you based on evidence provided by your sister, who coincidentally received $55 million immediately afterward. That is exactly what happened. I confirmed, playing the recording I had made of Emma's phone conversation. Patricia listened intently, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. This recording is compelling, but we need more concrete evidence to build a case, she explained. Your sister mentioned fake financial records and a private investigator. We need to identify who created those documents and how they were presented to your parents. Patricia agreed to take my case on a contingency basis, meaning she would only get paid if we successfully recovered some of my inheritance. She also recommended hiring our own private investigator to research Emma's claims and the mysterious adoption records she had mentioned. There is something else, Patricia added, studying my face carefully. You mentioned looking like your father and sharing your mother's mannerisms. In my experience, adoptive children rarely bear such strong physical resemblances to their parents unless the adoption occurred within the extended family. That observation sparked a new theory that made my pulse quicken. What if Emma was the adopted child and she was projecting that reality onto me to cover her own insecurities about belonging to the family? Our private investigator, a former police detective named James Morrison, began working immediately to trace the financial documents Emma had used to frame me. Within 48 hours, he discovered that the alleged evidence had been created by a disgraced forensic accountant who had lost his professional license for fabricating financial records in divorce cases. Your sister paid this guy $25,000 to create a false paper trail showing you had stolen money from your parents' business accounts, James explained during our meeting at Patricia's office. The timestamps on the digital files prove these documents were created just 2 weeks before your parents disinherited you. But James had uncovered something even more interesting. I also looked into the adoption records your sister mentioned. According to the state database, there is only one adoption associated with your family address, and it occurred 26 years ago. I felt my heart race as I realized what that meant. Emma was 26 years old, which would make her the adopted child, not me. She had been projecting her own adoption status onto me while simultaneously using it as a weapon to justify my disinheritance. We need to verify this information through official channels, Patricia cautioned. But if your sister is indeed the adopted child, that changes everything about her legal standing regarding inheritance rights. Over the next 2 weeks, we assembled a comprehensive case file that exposed every aspect of Emma's deception. The evidence included the original adoption papers showing Emma had been adopted from a teenage mother who could not care for her. The financial records proving the theft allegations were fabricated, and testimony from the disgraced accountant who admitted to creating fake documents in exchange for payment. But our most valuable discovery came from an unexpected source. My grandmother Rose's sister, Aunt Margaret, called me after hearing about my disinheritance through family gossip. She was furious about how my parents had treated me and wanted to share information that could help my case. Victoria, there are things about your family history that your parents never wanted anyone to discuss, Aunt Margaret explained during our coffee meeting downtown. When Emma was adopted, your mother made everyone promise to keep it secret because she was embarrassed about not being able to have a second child naturally. Aunt Margaret revealed that Emma's adoption had been arranged privately through a family friend, bypassing the typical agency procedures that would have created more detailed records. Your parents paid substantial amounts of money to ensure Emma's background remained hidden, including sealing court documents that would normally be accessible to other family members. Did Emma know she was adopted? I asked, trying to understand the psychological motivation behind her elaborate scheme. She found out accidentally when she was 16, Aunt Margaret replied. Your mother's attorney called the house asking about updating Emma's adoption papers for college applications, and Emma answered the phone. She confronted your parents that night, and they finally told her the truth. That explanation illuminated so much about Emma's behavior over the past decade. Her desperate need to prove herself worthy of the family name, her competitiveness with me, and her ultimate decision to eliminate me entirely from the inheritance equation all made sense when viewed through the lens of an adopted child's insecurity about belonging. There is more, Aunt Margaret continued. Your parents have been secretly funding Emma's lifestyle for years, paying for her apartment, her car, and even some of her college expenses that were not covered by scholarships. They felt guilty about adopting her under false pretenses and have been overcompensating ever since. Armed with this information, Patricia filed a formal challenge to my disinheritance, citing fraud, manipulation, and conspiracy to deprive me of my legal inheritance rights. We also sent a detailed letter to my parents outlining all the evidence we had discovered, giving them an opportunity to rectify the situation voluntarily before we proceeded to court. The response came within 24 hours, and it was not what I had expected. My father called Patricia's office directly, requesting an immediate meeting to discuss our findings. "Mr. Robert wants to review your evidence personally," Patricia told me. He sounded shaken when I mentioned the adoption records and the fabricated financial documents. We scheduled the meeting for the following Friday at Patricia's office. I spent the days leading up to that confrontation preparing myself emotionally for seeing my parents again and presenting them with proof of Emma's betrayal. The night before our meeting, I received an unexpected phone call from Marcus, Emma's fiancé. His voice sounded strained and nervous as he asked if we could meet privately to discuss important information about Emma that could affect everyone involved. Against Patricia's advice, I agreed to meet Marcus at a neutral location downtown. His demeanor was completely different from the confident, satisfied man I had seen at the engagement party. He looked exhausted and worried as he sat across from me in the coffee shop. "Victoria, I need you to know that I had no idea about Emma's plan to frame you." Marcus began, his voice barely above a whisper. "She told me your parents had discovered your theft on their own and were disinheriting you as a natural consequence of your actions." "When did you learn the truth?" I asked, studying his face for signs of deception. "2 nights ago," he replied, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Emma got drunk after dinner and started bragging about how cleverly she had manipulated the entire situation. She described hiring the fake accountant and bribing the private investigator in detail, laughing about how easily your parents had believed her lies." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. I recorded our conversation because I could not believe what I was hearing. Emma admitted to everything: the fake financial records, the adoption manipulation, even her plans to contest any legal challenges you might bring. He played a portion of the recording, and I listened to Emma's voice describing her scheme with the same cruel satisfaction I had heard during her phone call that morning I left home. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, genuinely confused about his motivations. "Because I cannot marry someone capable of this level of deception and cruelty," Marcus replied firmly. "If she can destroy her own sister so callously, what would she do to me if our relationship ever became inconvenient for her?" This unexpected alliance gave us the final piece of evidence we needed to completely expose Emma's manipulation and restore my rightful place in the family. Inheritance. The meeting at Patricia's office felt like a courtroom drama as my parents sat across from us, their faces pale and strained. Dad's usual commanding presence had diminished considerably, while Mom twisted her wedding ring nervously as Patricia presented our evidence methodically. This recording clearly shows Emma admitting to fabricating financial records, Patricia explained, playing the audio of Emma's conversation with Marcus. My parents listened in stunned silence as their golden daughter's voice filled the room, describing her manipulation with callous pride. Furthermore, Patricia continued sliding documents across the table. "We have testimony from the disgraced accountant Emma hired to create false evidence against Victoria. He has provided a sworn affidavit detailing exactly how much Emma paid him and what specific documents she requested." Mom's hands trembled as she examined the paperwork. "This cannot be true," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Emma would never do something so calculating and cruel." "There is more," I said, quietly producing the adoption records that James had uncovered. "Emma has been lying about my adoption status while hiding the truth about her own background." Dad's face went completely white as he recognized the official state documents. The adoption papers clearly showed Emma's placement with their family 26 years ago, along with sealed records from the private arrangement they had made to conceal her origins. "How did you obtain these, Dad?" asked, his voice barely audible. "Through legal channels available to any family member," Patricia replied smoothly. The question is why Emma felt the need to project her adoption status onto Victoria while simultaneously using it to justify disinheritance. I watched my parents process this information, seeing the exact moment when they realized how thoroughly Emma had manipulated them. The financial theft allegations, the adoption confusion, the timing of the $55 million gift, everything suddenly made sense as part of a coordinated scheme. "We need to speak with Emma immediately," Mom said, reaching for her phone with shaking hands. "That might not be advisable," Patricia warned. "Emma is currently unaware that we have exposed her deception. Any premature confrontation could give her time to prepare additional lies or dispose of evidence." Instead, we arranged for Emma and Marcus to attend a family meeting the following evening under the pretense of discussing wedding plans. Mom called Emma personally, her voice carefully controlled as she invited them to dinner at the family home. Of course, Mother Emma's voice carried clearly through the speakerphone. "Marcus and I would love to celebrate our engagement properly with the family. Should Victoria be joining us?" The casual cruelty in her question made Dad wince visibly. "Victoria will not be attending," Mom replied, following our scripted response. That evening, I waited in Patricia's office while my parents confronted Emma with the evidence we had compiled. James Morrison had installed discreet recording equipment in the dining room to capture Emma's response to being exposed. The confrontation began calmly with my parents asking Emma to explain certain financial discrepancies they had recently discovered. Emma launched into her familiar narrative about my alleged theft confidently, repeating the same lies that had worked so effectively before. Dad's voice came through our listening device. "We have reviewed the financial records you provided, and they appear to have been fabricated." The silence that followed was deafening. When Emma finally spoke, her voice had lost its confident tone. "What do you mean fabricated? I hired a professional investigator who provided comprehensive documentation." "A professional investigator who lost his license for creating false evidence," Mom added quietly. "An investigator you paid $25,000 to frame your sister." Emma's response was immediate and vicious. "You have no proof of that accusation," she snapped, abandoning any pretense of innocence. "Victoria has obviously hired lawyers to create lies about me because she cannot accept that you finally recognized which daughter deserves your legacy." "We also have the original adoption records," Dad said, and I could hear Emma's sharp intake of breath through the recording equipment. "What adoption records?" Emma asked, but her voice betrayed her growing panic. "Your adoption records, Emma," Mom replied sadly. "The papers we thought were safely sealed showing that you were placed with our family when you were 6 months old." The explosion that followed was unlike anything I had ever heard from my usually composed sister. Emma screamed accusations, threats, and justifications in a torrent of rage that revealed her true character completely. "I deserved that money," Emma shrieked. "I have spent my entire life proving I belong in this family while Victoria coasted on her biological connection. Everything I did was to secure what should have been mine from the beginning." Marcus's voice cut through Emma's tirade, calm and resolute. "Emma, I cannot be part of this anymore. Your parents deserve to know that I have been cooperating with Victoria's investigation because I recorded our conversation where you admitted to everything." The betrayal in Emma's voice was absolute. "You recorded me. After everything we planned together." "I planned nothing," Marcus replied firmly. "You manipulated me just like you manipulated everyone else. I thought I was marrying someone honest and loving, not someone capable of destroying her own family through lies and fraud." Emma's response was a string of threats and curses that would have made a sailor blush. She accused Marcus of conspiring with me, threatened to sue everyone involved, and demanded her $55 million as compensation for years of feeling like an outsider in her own family. "The money transfer will be reversed immediately," Dad announced, his voice heavy with disappointment and regret. "The accounts have been frozen, pending a complete investigation of all financial irregularities." Emma's final words before storming out were chilling in their honesty. "This family destroyed me the moment you decided to keep my adoption secret. I was never going to be good enough, so I decided to eliminate the competition entirely. Victoria may have won this battle, but I will make sure everyone pays for humiliating me." The recording ended with the sound of the front door slamming and Emma's car screeching out of the driveway at dangerous speeds. The aftermath of Emma's exposure unfolded like a carefully orchestrated demolition. Within 24 hours of the confrontation, my parents had contacted their bank to reverse the $55 million transfer, only to discover that Emma had already moved $30 million into offshore accounts that would take months to trace and recover. Patricia worked with federal investigators who specialized in financial fraud to track Emma's money trail. "Your sister was more prepared than we anticipated," she explained during our emergency meeting. She had been planning this exit strategy for months, establishing accounts in countries with strict banking privacy laws. But Emma's desperation led to increasingly reckless behavior that ultimately sealed her fate. She attempted to withdraw the remaining $25 million from the joint account she shared with Marcus, not knowing he had already contacted the bank to freeze all transactions pending legal review. When the withdrawal was denied, Emma showed up at the bank in person, screaming at tellers and demanding access to her money. Security cameras captured her complete breakdown, including her admission that she had stolen the funds from her parents through fraud and manipulation. "I earned that money by getting rid of the competition," Emma shouted at the bank manager, unaware that her words were being recorded. "My parents were too stupid to see that Victoria was worthless, so I had to show them the truth through creative means." That recording became crucial evidence in the criminal charges that followed. The district attorney's office filed multiple felony counts against Emma, including fraud, identity, theft, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Marcus proved to be an invaluable witness in the legal proceedings. His testimony about Emma's confessions combined with the recordings he had made painted a picture of someone who had systematically planned to destroy her own family for financial gain. Emma told me she had been preparing for this moment since she discovered her adoption at 16. Marcus testified during the preliminary hearing. She said she had always felt like an outsider and was determined to secure her position by eliminating any competition for her parents' affections and resources. The revelation of Emma's adoption sent shockwaves through my parents' social circle. Many of their business associates and friends admitted they had suspected something unusual about the family dynamics, but no one had imagined the depth of Emma's deception. My parents aged visibly during those weeks of legal proceedings and media attention. The pharmaceutical company they had built over decades faced scrutiny from business partners who questioned their judgment and decision-making abilities. "How could we have been so blind?" Mom asked during one of our tentative reconciliation meetings. "Emma was our daughter for 26 years, and we never saw this side of her personality." Dad struggled, even more with the betrayal. "I taught her everything about business ethics and family loyalty," he said, his voice hollow with disappointment. "She used those lessons to manipulate us more effectively." The most devastating blow came when investigators discovered that Emma had been systematically stealing from my parents' business for over 2 years, not just the months she had claimed in her fabricated evidence against me. She had used her access to company accounts to fund her lifestyle, her private investigator, and her elaborate scheme to frame me. The total amount Emma stole approaches $700,000, the forensic accountant reported during a family meeting with prosecutors. She had become increasingly sophisticated in her methods, suggesting this was not impulsive behavior, but a long-term criminal enterprise. Emma's legal team attempted to negotiate a plea deal that would involve returning the stolen money in exchange for reduced charges. However, her refusal to reveal the location of the offshore accounts made prosecutors unwilling to offer any leniency. The trial became a media sensation when local news outlets picked up the story of the pharmaceutical heiress who had framed her own sister to steal millions in inheritance money. Headlines like "Sister Steals Sister's $55 million inheritance through elaborate fraud" dominated local newspapers for weeks. During the trial, Emma's defense attorneys tried to argue that her actions were the result of psychological trauma from learning about her adoption. They brought in expert witnesses who testified about the emotional impact of discovering one's true origins during adolescence. But the prosecution's case was overwhelming. They presented recordings of Emma's confessions, testimony from the corrupt accountant she had hired, financial records showing her systematic theft from the family business, and evidence of her attempts to hide money in foreign accounts. The most damaging testimony came from Emma herself when she took the stand in her own defense. Under cross-examination, She revealed the full extent of her narcissistic worldview and lack of remorse for destroying her family. "I did what was necessary to secure my future," Emma stated coldly when asked about framing me for theft. "Victoria had advantages I never had, simply because she was born into this family instead of being chosen for it. I leveled the playing field using intelligence and planning." When asked if she felt any guilt about her actions, Emma's response shocked even her own attorneys. "I feel regret that my plan was not executed more thoroughly. If I had been more careful about covering my tracks, Victoria would still be living in poverty while I enjoyed the life I deserved." That statement sealed her fate with the jury. After deliberating for less than 6 hours, they returned guilty verdicts on all charges. The judge sentenced Emma to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 8 years. "Your crimes represent a betrayal of the most fundamental bonds of family and trust," the judge stated during sentencing. "You systematically destroyed relationships that had sustained you throughout your life, demonstrating a level of selfishness and cruelty that demands significant punishment." Emma showed no emotion as the sentence was read, but her eyes found mine across the courtroom. The look she gave me was pure hatred, promising that this legal victory would not end her desire for revenge. As the bailiff led Emma away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost had been the complete destruction of the family I had grown up believing was unbreakable. 6 months after Emma's sentencing, my parents and I sat together in the same dining room where this nightmare had begun. The $55 million had been mostly recovered, though legal fees and the complexities of international banking had reduced the final amount to $47 million. "We want you to have it all," Dad said, quietly sliding papers across the table that would restore my full inheritance rights, plus additional compensation for the emotional trauma Emma had caused. "No amount of money can undo what we put you through, but we hope this demonstrates how deeply we regret believing her lies over your character." Mom had been attending therapy to process her guilt over the situation. The therapist helped me understand that Emma had been manipulating all of us for years, she explained, tears streaming down her face. She was so skilled at telling us what we wanted to hear while presenting herself as the perfect daughter. The pharmaceutical company had survived the scandal, though Dad had decided to begin succession planning that would eventually transfer control to professional managers rather than family members. "We learned that mixing family dynamics with business decisions creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited," he admitted. "I had used the months during Emma's trial to rebuild my own life and career. With financial pressure removed, I enrolled in graduate school to pursue a degree in forensic accounting inspired by my experience uncovering Emma's fraud. I want to help other families who are dealing with financial manipulation and abuse," I explained to my parents during one of our weekly dinners. "This experience taught me how sophisticated these schemes can become when the perpetrator understands their victim's emotional triggers." Patricia had become more than just my attorney. She had become a mentor and friend who helped me navigate the complex process of healing from family betrayal. "Your strength throughout this ordeal has been remarkable," she told me. "Many people would have been broken by what Emma put you through." The most unexpected development was my growing relationship with Marcus, who had also been victimized by Emma's deceptions. Our shared experience of being manipulated by someone we trusted created a bond that gradually evolved into genuine friendship and eventually something deeper. "I feel like we both dodged a bullet," Marcus said during one of our coffee meetings that had become a weekly tradition. "Imagine if Emma had succeeded in her plan, and we had never discovered her true nature." Marcus had broken off the engagement immediately after Emma's confession, returning the ring and canceling all wedding arrangements. "I realized that everything I thought I loved about Emma was an act she performed to secure my cooperation in her scheme," he explained. "We took our relationship slowly, both of us needing time to process the trauma of Emma's betrayal and rebuild our ability to trust. But there was something healing about being with someone who understood exactly what it felt like to discover that someone you loved had been systematically deceiving you." My parents welcomed Marcus into our slowly rebuilding family circle, grateful to have someone who had supported me during the darkest period of our lives. "You chose to do the right thing when it would have been easier to stay silent," Mom told him during a family dinner. That kind of integrity is rare and precious. The legal proceedings had also revealed the extent to which Emma had isolated me from potential support systems over the years. Friends and extended family members came forward to share stories of how Emma had spread rumors about my mental health, financial problems, and relationship failures to prevent them from getting close to me. She told me you were jealous of her success and had been saying terrible things about her behind her back. My cousin Sarah admitted during a reconciliation lunch. I feel awful for believing her lies and avoiding you for all those years. These revelations helped explain why I had felt so alone during my disinheritance. Emma had spent years poisoning relationships and burning bridges to ensure I would have nowhere to turn when she finally executed her plan. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of my vindication was watching Emma's former friends and colleagues distance themselves from her as the truth emerged. The marketing firm where she had worked terminated her employment and launched an internal investigation to determine if she had committed any fraud against the company. Her sorority sisters, who had been prominently featured at the engagement party, publicly condemned her actions and removed her from their alumni directory. We cannot be associated with someone who would betray her own family so callously, their official statement read. Emma's imprisonment had become a cautionary tale within my parents' business and social circles. Your sister's case is being studied in business ethics courses, Dad informed me during one of our conversations. Her scheme is now used as an example of how family businesses can be vulnerable to internal fraud. As I write this story today, Emma has served 18 months of her 12-year sentence. She has made no attempt to contact our family or express remorse for her actions. According to her former cellmate, who was recently released, Emma spends her time planning what she calls her comeback strategy for when she gets out of prison. That information does not frighten me anymore. The naive young woman who trusted blindly and believed family loyalty was unconditional died the night of that engagement party. The person who emerged from that betrayal is stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who have proven their loyalty through actions rather than words. My relationship with my parents will never be exactly what it was before, but it has become something more honest and authentic. We talk openly about family dynamics, business decisions, and the warning signs we all missed about Emma's growing resentment and desperation. We learned that love without accountability enables destructive behavior. Mom reflected during a recent conversation. Emma needed boundaries and consequences years ago, but we were so afraid of losing her that we enabled her worst impulses. Looking back on this experience, I realized that Emma's betrayal was ultimately a gift disguised as a tragedy. It forced me to develop independence, resilience, and the ability to recognize genuine relationships from manipulative ones. Today, I am happier, stronger, and more fulfilled than I ever was when I was desperately seeking approval from people who viewed me as expendable. The family I have chosen, Marcus, Patricia, the friends who stood by me and my parents in their new, more honest version, is worth more than any amount of inheritance money. So, here's my question for all of you watching today. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that initially devastated you, but ultimately made you stronger? How did you rebuild trust and find your chosen family after biological family let you down? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below, because surviving family drama teaches us lessons that can help others facing similar situations. If this story resonated with you, or if you have experienced similar family manipulation, please hit that like button to help other people find this video who might need to hear that they are not alone. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming family betrayal and building authentic relationships, and share this video with anyone who might benefit from knowing that justice and healing are possible even after the most devastating family drama. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember that your worth is not determined by how family members choose to treat you. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from people who cannot appreciate your value, even when those people share your DNA. Your real family consists of people who choose to love and support you consistently, not people who view you as competition to be eliminated.